If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we are going to go through everything you need to know in order to create your own Renegade for Deviant the Renegades, or Remade, as the conspirators call them these days. Before we properly sink our teeth into tonight's episode, I wish to tell you what you'll need in order to follow along with me to make your first Deviant in Deviant the Renegades. First and foremost, you'll need a copy of the Deviant the Renegade sourcebook, either as a physical or PDF copy if you are a weirdo or allergic to books or something. If you are playing the game old school with the archaic devices known as pen and paper, you may have a friend, or two, who's willing to lend you their copy, but as more and more Remade are seeking the likes of Discord and Roll20 to play, it is highly unlikely someone will just lend you their book from afar. You may wish to purchase the Chronicles of Darkness core book, for it provides a full variety of merits, flaws, backgrounds and the like, as well as virtues and vices, if you wish to start your game as mortals who then become deviants. As of the writing of this script, Deviant the Renegades is the latest supplement in the Chronicles of Darkness line, so it is highly likely that your source for discovering this game is not as large as other game lines within the Chronicles of Darkness. You may have seen the one-shots done by Gehenna Gaming, heard it being discussed on various Onyx Path platforms such as the Onyx Pathcast, or if you are a regular listener of the Lore by Night podcast, you may have watched the Deviant the Renegades one-shot I ran on the Onyx Path Twitch channel, or the VOD on the Lore by Night YouTube channel, or Lore by Night Productions on Spotify and Apple Podcasts called Live Without You. I won't get too in-depth with Deviant lore for now. Instead, let us briefly go over the origin and clades presented in the core book. The origins presented are: Autodric, or the Elect, willingly sought out divergence as their primary goal. Epimorph, or the Volunteers, agreed to be remade out of necessity or empty promises. Exomorph, or the Unwilling, were forced into divergence through kidnapping or threat. Genotypals are born into their divergence. They were either born that way, or their divergence occurred as they grew up. Finally, the pathological are accidents. They became one of the Remade not by any intentional action, but by sheer happenstance. As for the clades presented in the core book, they are: the Cephalists are psychics, whose divergence unlocked the power of the mind to new and inhuman possibilities, granting supernatural focus and influence. Chimerics are hybrids that were merged somehow with another life form, be it with some sort of plant or animal. Coactives are deviants infused with intangible energy, absorbing and channeling it in some form. Invasives are implanted with foreign inanimate matter. On the surface, this makes them sound like traditional cyborgs, but not all invasives have mechanical or technological additions, be it with some mystical artifact or parasitic organism that caused the divergence. Finally, you have mutants, or grotesques, as they are so nicknamed, are deviants whose bodies rejected the divergence, but changed into something all of its own. Once you have the core book and any other source books you want, you'll need a character sheet. Drive-Thru-RPG doesn't easily provide PDF copies, so you will have to look elsewhere to find an interactive PDF character sheet. For this episode, I'll be using the mrgon.rocksolidshells.com interactive sheets, but there are others available, should you wish to use a different format. With that preparation shenanigans biting the dust, one can now begin to create their Deviant the Renegade's character. There's no system or dice roll to be made when determining your character's stats, unless you really want to, of course. Deviant the Renegades uses the Storyteller's system, which encourages players to become one with their character, to embrace them, as it were. Deviant has you take on the role of mortals who were taken in by conspiracies for a reason determined by you and the Storyteller. These conspiracies, whether it be small or large companies or cults, abused your trust and did something or some things only to empower themselves for their own gains. Something went wrong, breaking your soul and causing a divergence to occur as you border the line between supernatural and human in how you behave and look. In short, Deviants are very much human, but they paid a terrible price for their supernatural powers. You manage to escape from your makers, your progenitors, and the rest of the game follows where you and a cohort of Deviants have gone Renegade, wanting to fight back and fuck up some assholes, as you come to terms with your new existence, hiding from the public, whilst also trying to uphold your crumbling humanity. With the premise of the setting in mind, there is already plenty of questions you can start asking yourself. What drew your character in? What are they looking for? What are the answers they are hoping to get? And what would stop them from investigating furthermore? How did your character explain their supernatural experiences? Through faith, spirituality, or science? Chances are, it is not their entire life. They probably had a job, friends, family, and hobbies outside of seeking revenge and all of this deviant stuff. What sort of person were they in life? What did they do? How did they go about doing it? Or perhaps life in the conspiracy was all that they knew. What do they think of their new existence and how are they coping with it? Do they miss their older secluded lifestyle? Some of these questions will help you fill out most of the boxes at the top of the character sheet. Name is your character's name, whether it's their actual name or a pseudonym. Player is your name, and if you're struggling with that, then perhaps reconsider your life choices. Chronicle is the name of the game that you're playing in. Concept defines your character's notions, occupation, and potential role within the group. Origin is, well, how they entered the conspiracy, but more interestingly, describes the nature of the divergence and how the Remade, the Deviant, feels towards it. Clade, on the other hand, is the rough characterization of a Deviant by divergence process and variation type. In less confusing TTRPG parlance, you could think Origins as the race of your character, whilst Clade is the different class. Forms are literally different forms that some characters can assume through some perks of certain variations and scars, which we'll look at later in this guide. The most common of these are amalgam, devoted, self-made, symbiote, and transmissible. If you're using the main character sheet, you will notice the boxes that read conviction and loyalty. Ignore these for now, for they will come up later in this tutorial. Once you've come up with the initial concept, you must decide with the other players and storyteller the chronicle threat level, as it determines not only the variations inflicted onto the Remade and the more burdened the scars are, but the threatening attention of the conspiracies after them and their stance in the world. Each threat level determines the total magnitude dots a character has to assign during character creation, which excludes any free ones their character gets at character creation through their origin. Alternatively, your concepts are likely to exist after the conversation regarding the conspiracy threat level. The threat levels are: mutation has a total variation magnitude level of 2, with the conspiracy standing of 1. Hyperplasia has a total variation magnitude level of 5, with the conspiracy standing of 2. Dysplasia has a total variation magnitude level of 7, with the conspiracy standing of 3. Invasion has a total variation magnitude level of 10, with the conspiracy standing of 4. Metastasis has a total variation magnitude level of 12, with the conspiracy standing of 5. And Metamorphosis has a total variation magnitude level of 15, with the conspiracy standing of 6. As for my example character, Klaus Variation was just an ordinary guy down on his luck. He needed money, and jobs are hard to find when you drop out of school and can't go to college, let alone university. The best he could aspire to was stack tins of food in supermarkets and get shouted at by Karens wanting the manager. Happiness doesn't come easy for someone like that. That is, until he saw an ad for a job position in a newspaper for someone to work night shifts at Luna's Cycles, a private medical company. They needed more cleaners, and the pay was oddly high. Desperate, he applied and they were eager to have him, assigning him to the top 3 floors of the building. One night, he took the lift wanting to go up, but he pushed the wrong button, going to the basement level and discovering a whole secret operation. Rows upon rows of people being experimented on, humans and animals wired up to all sorts of machines and gizmos. The whole company was a front of a much larger operation. He couldn't learn that much more, for he was taken by the lab security and was forcibly worked on. He would become a horrible bat-like creature, made to collect and destroy rival companies, before being being rescued by his cohort. Now Klaus seeks to destroy the ones who wronged him while spying on his lover to make sure they are alive and well. On the plus side, he can now fly and talk to bats, which is something I suppose. In mechanical terms, he is an exomorph chimeric. As an exomorph, he gains 1 scar-free magnitude of an avert variation and an extra dot in conviction. As a chimeric, he can temporarily suppress a scar. In addition, he also gains the Untamed and Adrenaline Surge adaptations. All deviants, regardless of clade, get the universal adaptation Stubborn Resolve. For more information on those, see page 112 of the Deviant core book. Finally, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be setting the threat level to Metastasis, which, as a reminder, has a total variation magnitude level of 12 with a conspiracy standing of 5. Now that you've established some lore regarding your character, you should have an idea what sort of person they are when you assign points into your attributes. How do they solve their problems? Fighting, thinking, or talking? How do they naturally interact with the world? The attribute section is made up of 3 categories: mental, physical, and social. Each attribute starts off with 1 dot, and you then distribute 5 additional dots to a primary attribute, 4 to a secondary attribute, and 3 to a tertiary group. You can spread these points however you please, providing that no attribute exceeds 5. Klaus was never particularly bright, but he was never stupid. I would argue that his menial labour jobs and his odd schedules could potentially make him a patient individual. Since his transformation, he would have to have his wits about him, flying and picking off individual targets for lunar cycles, and of his cohort. It would make sense to me that his mental attribute is the primary group, strength is the secondary group, and social is the tertiary group. So I decided to leave intelligence at 1 and make the wits a total of 4 and the resolve with a total of 3. Strength is 2, dexterity is 3, and stamina is 2. Presence is 2, manipulation I've left at 1, and composure is 3. Dice rolls in the Chronicles of Darkness games are usually made up of 1 attribute plus a skill, as there are many ways of demonstrating feats of strength and intelligence, unless you're wanting to deadlift a horse for example, as that would be pure strength by my reckoning at least. The skills are divided into, from top to bottom, mental, physical, and social. Similar to the attributes portion of the character sheet, these are divided up into primary, secondary, and tertiary groups, whose points cannot exceed 5 either. The primary group gets 11 points, the secondary group gets 7 points, and the tertiary group gets 4 points. Once you have done this, you can assign some specialties, which are particular areas of expertise the character has, which allows you to add a dice to a specific role. For example, if your character was an iPad expert and was attempting to repair their mate's iPad, you could gain an additional die when repairing it. You put 3 specialties into any skill you have placed a point or more in. You can place multiple specialties to a skill. Regarding Klaus, the distribution of points should reflect his skill set as a hunter and a collector for lunar cycles, as a horrifying man-bat, including his observational skills for his previous jobs. Klaus will get 4 dots in the investigation skill. Moving on to physical, he will have 3 dots in athletics, brawl will get 4 points, stealth and survival will get 2 points, animal chem will get 3 points, intimidation will get 3 points, and streetwise will get 1 point. As for the specialties, he will have a biting specialty in brawl, a stalking specialty in stealth, and a bat specialty in animal chem. Next we move on to the divergence elements of your character, which is where things really become unique. Having decided on your character, clade, and some backstory elements for your character, you can start by assigning your powers to them, as well as the drawbacks for using them, the variations and scars. Let us start with the variations, your supernatural powers. You start with the number of dots as determined by the threat level. At least half of the Remade's variation magnitude must be invested into variations of its own clade and the universal category. Otherwise, you may pick from whichever categories you wish, for the same powers could manifest themselves in different ways. For example, the gigantic variation for a chimeric might become a large Venus flytrap, whereas an invasive could become a Megazord-inspired design that shoots lasers from its nipples. Let's have a look at Klaus, our male-presenting chiroptean. The threat level is Metastasis, and the conspiracy standing is 5, and the total variation magnitude is 12. This means his total dots must add up to 12. Half of those must come from the clade or universal variation categories, and no single variation may exceed 5. This excludes the scar-free variation we get from the exomorph origin. Starting with the origin variation, I will give him Predator's Cunning, a chimeric variation with the elusive effect, which gives him the edge when someone is searching for him. It would make sense that this is more a second nature thing to Klaus. Next, I will assign his variations, which will later be entangled with scars. I'm assigning 5 into his Flight Universal variation, and will have a magnitude rating of 4 for the Gigantic Universal variation, meaning we have 3 more points to spend. Being a bat, flight is a fairly important skill to have, and whilst being gigantic isn't something immediately associated with bats, Lunar Cycles employed this as a means of terrifying hordes of opposition. He will also get Specialized Sense, another universal variation which will allow him to hear pretty well. Finally, with 2 points left to spend, I will grant him Telepathy, which is a Cephalist variation with both the Attune and Project effects, as well as the Recontact effect. Now we must assign those variations with scars, which is where the old expression, with great power comes great responsibility, which sucks ass not only mechanically, but it is difficult to get your head around, so take this nice and slow. When you activate a variation, it may cause one of your scars to come into play, each with various different effects. Look at the variation you have with the highest dot number. Is it something you can control well, something that gets out of control often, or something that has a persistent background effect? Once you pick one of those 3, pick either a controlled scar which can be treated with high control, involuntary scar which is not so easy to control, or a persistent scar which you can control but with persistent background effects. This determines both your scar and variation activation and should be thematically tied together. Each variation must have a scar of equal or greater magnitude. One scar can go to many variations, but a variation must not have multiple scars. Let's go back to Klaus. His flight variation is entangled with the Conspicuous Appearance scar, which is also magnitude 5. He is monstrous, often confused as one of the supernatural by hunters, as he is a big old bat. What makes this worse is he has a nastier side. Paired with his gigantic variation is the persistent scar Murderous Urge. He has become far more monstrous internally, forcing him to kill 2 people each time he fails a scar resistance roll to bastardize it poorly. This was a secret employed by Lunar Cycles. This also has a magnitude of 4. Finally, I am spreading the concentration scar across Specialized Sense and Telepathy, the former having a magnitude of 3, while Specialized Sense and Telepathy have 2 and 1 point respectively. These are more mental tasks that Klaus has to perform, and it tires him out each time he has to focus. If you are still confused how to spread dots about, because I'm aware that this is a very awkward process in the book, refer to the table on page 108, as that can help to break things down a little more. Having done all that mental gymnastics, we can start to think about our Deviant's loyalty and conviction touchstones. A touchstone is someone, thing, place or item that is close to them, anchoring them to their failing humanity. Our loyalty touchstone brings comfort, someone the Deviant can go to in times of emotional need, whilst conviction brings the Deviant hate and rage that pushes the Deviant to escape and fight. Renegades get 3 dots of conviction and 1 dot of loyalty to spend, plus the dot they get from their origin. In the case of Klaus, he receives the extra conviction dot. So let's go through these touchstones. Max Kondo is the security guard that found Klaus, and that's clearly a conviction. Ethan is Klaus's boyfriend. Lunar Cycle, the old workplace, is a conviction as well, and Ben McAllister, an old school bully, is also going to be a conviction. We are reaching the end of the character creation process. Take a look at the part that says Acclamation. This represents the Deviant's awareness of the supernatural and their acceptance of their state of being. Renegades start their first session at 0, but can increase this to 1 by spending 5 of their 10 merit points, or all 10 of them, to make the Acclamation 2. Merits are things like resources, talents and allies that you can call upon to help you in your chronicle. Those that are marked with Avert are easier to target by your conspiracies and thus making it easier to track you down. For simplicity's sake, I will be sticking to what is in the Deviant the Renegades core book. I shall put 3 points in Safe Place, 3 points in Voice of the Wild, 2 points in Air of Menace, 1 point in Direction Sense, and 1 point in Hypervigilance. Next we assign some advantages to fill in some missing bits in your character sheet. Stability and size both begin at 5. Willpower equals Resolve plus Composure. Health equals to your size plus Stamina. Speed equals 5 plus Strength plus Dexterity. Initiative equals Dexterity plus Composure. Defense is the lower of Dexterity plus Athletics or Wit plus Athletics. Pick one aspiration, which is something your character wants to achieve by the end of the chapter. Regarding Klaus, his health is 7 and his willpower is 6, stability is 5, his size is 5, his speed is 10, defense is 6, initiative modifier is 6, and the aspirations is to obviously donate to the Law by Night Ko-fi page. Once you have finished adding those final touches, you can finally say that you have made your first Deviant the Renegades character. Yes, the book has all that you need to understand the character creation process, but I have found that it sometimes helps to have someone walk you through the process, rather than nag your storyteller 100 times. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.